Hey everyone, and welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're going to be taking a deep dive into brain rot.
Ooh, brain rot. Sounds fun.
Yeah, right? So it was actually chosen as Oxford's Word of the Year for 2024,
Yeah.
which I thought was really interesting. And we've got some really interesting articles to kind of guide our depth dive today from Scientific American, Oxford University Press, and AP News.
Great sources.
Yeah, should be pretty interesting. So, I guess to kick things off, for those who maybe haven't heard this term before, how would you explain what brain rot is?
Um, I think we all kind of know, that feeling when you've been like scrolling on social media for hours or you've been like binge watching videos and you just feel like mentally foggy or fatigued.
Yeah.
That's kind of the essence of brain rot.
Yeah.
It's this perception that like all this like fluffy content or like low quality content is actually like making us less sharp mentally.
Yeah, interesting. You know what I thought was really interesting when I was doing some research for this was that this isn't actually a new idea.
Right.
Like, this has been around for a while. Thoreau actually used this term way back in 1854 in Walden.
That's right. And I think what's interesting is that while, he was kind of critiquing the oversimplification of complex ideas back then, he like likened it to potato rot affecting crops.
Wow.
So it seems that this kind of anxiety about dumbing ourselves down with like shallow content has been around for centuries, even before, the internet.
Right.
But I think, the fact that the usage has spiked 230% in just the last year, according to the Oxford English Dictionary, it really shows how much this resonates today.
Yeah, for sure. So we've kind of established what it is, this feeling of mental decline from too much, fluffy online content. But is there any, actual science behind this?
Well, I think while brain rot itself is more of a colloquial term,
Yeah.
I think there is a growing body of research on multitasking and attention that helps explain why it feels so real.
Okay.
And one really fascinating area is the study of sludge content, particularly on platforms like TikTok.
Okay. Sludge content. That's a new one for me. What exactly is that?
So imagine like a screen where there are multiple videos playing, like simultaneously.
Oh, wow.
It's just like this really intense collage of
Yeah.
like constantly shifting images and sounds, all kind of vying for your attention.
Wow, that sounds intense.
It is, and some viewers find it totally overstimulating,
Yeah, I can imagine.
while others find it strangely compelling and kind of addicting.
Interesting. So it takes multitasking to a whole new level.
Yeah, it really does.
But how does this all connect back to brain rot?
Well, I think like when we force our brains to constantly switch between these like multiple information streams, it really fragments our attention.
Okay.
Like, it's like trying to hold on to like handfuls of sand.
Yeah.
Some of it inevitably slips through your fingers.
Right.
And I think the Scientific American article had some research showing that this constant task switching can actually impair our ability to like focus, to comprehend, and to remember information.
That makes sense. I mean, I think we've all experienced that feeling of mental drain after, too much screen time.
Totally.
Like our brains are just exhausted from all the juggling.
Exactly. And, this brings up another really interesting point.
Yeah.
How content and our ways of consuming it have evolved over time.
Okay.
Consider like television, for example.
Mm.
Like early TV shows had like single straightforward storylines.
Mm-hmm.
But, today's shows are so complex with like multiple plots and characters, timelines, all interwoven
Oh, absolutely.
or constantly.
Yeah, sometimes I find myself rewinding just to keep up with all the different storylines.
I do too. I do too. So it kind of makes you wonder, is that evolution somehow training us for this world of like sludge content?
Right.
Like, are we becoming more accustomed to processing so much information at once?
Yeah.
It's a good question.
It seems like we crave, more and more stimulation, more information packed into a single experience.
Well, yeah.
It makes you wonder, is this insatiable need for constant stimulation actually changing our brains?
Yeah, that's the big question.
And if so, what are the long-term implications of that?
Right, exactly.
Wow. So it seems like brain rot isn't just about feeling mentally sluggish, but it could be about a fundamental shift in how our brains actually function.
And I think to add another layer to that, the psychological effects of all this sludge seem to really vary.
Yeah.
For some, and especially like neurodivergent individuals, it can be incredibly overstimulating and can lead to anxiety.
Right.
But for others, it can be oddly soothing, almost like a form of dissociation.
Wait, really? people find this chaotic content calming.
Yeah, it's kind of counterintuitive,
It's
right?
so strange.
But there's this concept called normative dissociation,
Okay.
which, like in some contexts, can actually be beneficial for creativity and problem solving.
Interesting.
It's kind of like letting your brain just go on autopilot and wander freely.
So brain rot has this kind of like strange duality to it. It can be both overstimulating and calming, depending on the individual.
Yeah.
It seems like there's no simple answer to what its effects are. But before we get into, what we can actually do about this and like whether this is something to actually be concerned about,
Yeah.
I wanted to touch on one more thing that I thought was really interesting. One of the Scientific American articles talked about these ancient brains that haven't decomposed as expected.
Oh.
Apparently, MIC-folded proteins, the kind that are associated with diseases like Alzheimer's, can actually preserve brains for thousands of years.
That's wise.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
So these harmful proteins that cause brain diseases in the living can actually prevent brains from decaying after death.
That is so paradoxical.
That's so strange.
But yeah, apparently these misfolded proteins kind of clump together in a way that makes brain tissue resistant to decomposition.
Wow.
It's such a fascinating contrast to this, like, figurative brain rot we've been talking about,
Yeah, it's like this really interesting connection.
Yeah.
Like, on one hand, we have the figurative brain rot of, like, too much online content, and then we have this literal preservation of brains because of these protein changes.
Right.
It makes you think about the interplay between, like, information and our physical brains in a whole new way.
Definitely. And it begs the question, could there be a link between how we engage with information during our lives and the long-term health of our physical brains?
Right.
That's something to think about.
Yeah, that's a really provocative thought. So I guess now that we've kind of explored brain rot from both like a figurative and literal perspective,
Yeah.
where do we go from here?
Well, I think now it's time to delve into the potential consequences of all this brain rot,
Yeah.
and then explore what we can do to actually mitigate its effects.
Okay, sounds good. Let's dive in.
Okay, so we've talked about how brain rot feels,
Right.
that mental fog and everything.
Yeah.
But what are the potential long-term consequences?
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering. Like,
Oh, this
does it
is-
go beyond just like feeling kind of mentally sluggish?
Right.
Like, could it actually impact our ability to think critically, make decisions, or even maintain relationships?
Yeah, I think those are all valid concerns.
Okay.
Imagine trying to have a nuanced conversation
Right.
or tackle a complex problem when your attention span feels totally shot
Yeah.
and you can't remember details.
Yeah.
Even simple decision making can become a chore when you're constantly bombarded with distractions.
Yeah, it's like trying to build a house of cards on a roller coaster,
That's a great analogy.
Like everything is shifting and it's impossible to focus.
Yeah.
Wow. So yeah.
And this inability to focus can actually have ripple effects in our relationships as well.
Right.
If we can't truly listen or engage in really deep conversations,
Mm-hmm.
it can create distance and misunderstandings.
So it's not just an individual problem. It's like it can impact our interactions with the world around us, which is
Totally.
a little concerning, but surely there are ways to combat this.
Absolutely.
Right.
One key, I think, is just becoming more conscious of our content consumption habits.
Okay.
Instead of, passively absorbing whatever pops up on our feeds,
Right.
we can actively seek out information that's stimulating, challenging, enriching.
Okay, so less doom scrolling and more
Yes.
brain food.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Dive into a thought-provoking book.
Right.
Watch a documentary
Yeah.
that expands our understanding of the world.
Learn a new skill.
Totally.
Engage in stimulating conversations.
Yes, anything that gets those mental gears turning and helps us build those attention muscles.
So it's like hitting the gym for our brains instead of letting them atrophy in front of the screen.
Exactly.
But I mean, let's be real. Sometimes we just need to unwind
Of course.
and watch something silly or mindless. Is there room for that in a brain rot resistant life?
Of course. Yeah. I don't think enjoying a funny video or indulging in some guilty pleasure TV is going to cause irreversible damage.
Right.
It's all about balance, right?
Okay.
The key is just to be aware of how much time we're spending on that kind of mindless entertainment.
Right.
And make sure it's not dominating our lives.
Okay, so it's not about becoming like a digital hermit
Right.
and swearing off all forms of entertainment, but
Exactly.
just kind of being mindful of those choices
Right.
and finding that sweet spot
Yeah.
between like mental stimulation and relaxation.
Exactly. And this brings us to another, like, I think really important factor in the brain rot conversation,
Okay.
which is the role of social media,
Right.
which is often, seen as
Yeah.
like the epicenter of mindless scrolling and attention-grabbing headlines.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it can feel like a constant battle for your attention on social media.
True.
But, I also know people who like use social media to connect with others,
Yeah.
share information,
Right.
even like build communities around like shared interests.
Absolutely. And that's a great point. Like, social media itself isn't inherently like good or bad.
Right.
It's a tool.
Right.
And like any tool, it can be used for, positive or negative purposes.
Right.
I think instead of letting the algorithm, just dictate what we see,
Right.
we can actually curate our own experience.
Okay.
Like, we can choose to follow accounts that share valuable content.
Yeah.
Engage in like meaningful conversations, connect with people who inspire us.
So it's about taking back control of our social media feeds and using them intentionally to like
Exactly.
connect and learn.
Yeah.
So being like the architect of your own like digital world.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that idea of like taking control, I think, is really crucial when it comes to combating brain rot. It's like recognizing that we actually have the power to choose what we consume, how we engage with information, and how we protect our mental well-being in like this digital age.
Right. It's empowering because it means that brain rot isn't like some inevitable fate.
Right.
Like we're not just helpless victims of the internet.
Totally.
Like we actually have agency.
We do. We do. And it's not about like rejecting technology or becoming Luddites.
Right.
It's about using technology wisely and making it work for us, not against us.
So how do we do that? How do we become more discerning consumers of information?
Well, I think one key is to really develop our critical thinking skills.
Okay.
Like, we need to learn how to actually evaluate information effectively,
Yeah.
question assumptions,
Okay.
consider different perspectives, especially like, in this age of misinformation and echo chambers.
Right.
It's so vital to be able to like discern fact from fiction.
Right. So it's not just about what we consume, but how we consume it.
Exactly.
It's about becoming like critical thinkers. Analyzing the information that we're, constantly bombarded with and
Right.
not taking everything at face value.
Exactly. It's like becoming like information detectives, always looking for those clues that like help us understand the bigger picture and the potential biases at play.
Yeah, like understanding how media can be used to like manipulate or influence us.
Exactly. And that's where media literacy education, I think, becomes really crucial.
Okay.
I think it should be like a fundamental part of our education system
Right.
to really empower individuals to like critically evaluate information,
Yeah.
understand media's influence,
Mhm.
and make those like informed choices about their digital consumption.
Right. So it's like giving people the toolkit they need to navigate this like really complex digital world.
Totally.
Become like savvy, discerning, and empowered consumers of information.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think this education should start like early
Yeah.
from a young age because, kids are increasingly exposed to the digital world earlier and earlier.
Right. Absolutely.
It's like giving them, a mental compass
Yeah.
and a set of maps to like navigate this terrain.
Right. So it's not just about protecting ourselves from brain rot. It's
Right.
about like equipping the next generation
Yes.
with the skills to
And
need to thrive in this digital age.
Totally. It's about empowering them to be like thoughtful, responsible, and informed digital citizens.
Mm-hmm.
And remember this journey of like mindful information consumption.
Right.
It's not a solo endeavor.
Okay.
Like, we can support each other by, sharing valuable content,
Right.
recommending thought-provoking books,
Yeah.
engaging in stimulating conversations.
Yeah. It's like building a community of like lifelong learners
Totally.
dedicated to expanding their minds and like fighting back against this like force of brain rot.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that we're all in this together,
Mm-hmm.
navigating this complex digital landscape.
Right.
And that brings us to a like really crucial aspect that we haven't really touched on yet, which is the role of our physical bodies.
Wait, our physical bodies? I thought we were talking about like mental decline from too much online content.
We are,
Okay.
But our minds and bodies are inextricably linked.
Okay.
What affects one affects the other.
Right.
And I think, when we prioritize our physical well-being, we're also supporting our cognitive health.
Okay, so you're saying that like things like exercise, sleep, a healthy diet
Yes, all of that.
can actually help us combat brain rot.
Totally.
Okay.
I think, activities that benefit our physical health also have like really positive effects on brain function.
Interesting.
It's not just about what we put into our minds.
Right.
It's also about how we treat our bodies.
Okay, so fighting brain rot isn't just like a mental game.
Right.
It's like a whole body approach.
Yes.
It's about recognizing that true well-being encompasses like both mind and body.
Precisely. It's
Yep.
about finding that balance and like nurturing all aspects of ourselves.
It's like recognizing that our well-being is a symphony and like all the instruments need to be in tune
I love that.
to create a harmonious melody.
Yes. Beautifully put.
Wow. So, okay.
This harmony is like, I think, central to combating brain rot.
Okay.
It's about finding that sweet spot where like our minds are stimulated, our bodies are healthy, and our spirits are lifted.
Right. So it's not just about avoiding mental decline.
Right.
It's about striving for like this optimal well-being where
Yeah.
we're thriving mentally and physically.
Yeah.
But like with all the demands of modern life, how do we even find the time and energy to like focus on all of this?
That's where the concept of balance, I think, really comes in.
Okay.
It's about finding that like equilibrium in our relationship with technology,
Right.
our consumption of information,
Okay.
and just like our lives as a whole.
So again, not about becoming a digital hermit
Right.
or like a technophobe,
Exactly.
but it's about finding that sweet spot
Yeah.
where technology enhances our lives without consuming them entirely.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that technology is a tool.
Right.
And like any tool, it can be used for good or for ill.
Right.
The key is to use it wisely and make sure it serves our needs, not the other way around.
Right. So it's not about rejecting technology.
Right.
It's about reclaiming our agency and deciding how we want to integrate it into our lives.
Precisely. It's about being the masters of our own digital destiny.
I love that.
Yeah. And ensuring that technology supports our well-being, our growth, and our aspirations.
That's a much more empowering perspective
Totally.
than just like bemoaning the evils of the internet.
Right.
But how do we put this into practice? How
Yeah.
do we actually find this balance?
Well, I think one key is to start by like acknowledging the power of human connection.
Okay.
It's so easy to feel isolated when we're like glued to our screens,
Yeah.
missing out on real life interactions and meaningful
Right.
relationships.
Yeah. Like sometimes it feels like we're more connected online than we are in person.
Yeah, totally.
But how does human connection help us combat brain rot?
Well, I think about it like one of the hallmarks of brain rot is that feeling of isolation,
Right.
that sense of being like disconnected from the world around us.
Yeah.
And like human beings are social creatures. Like,
Right.
we thrive on interaction, empathy, and a sense of belonging.
So you're saying that fighting brain rot isn't just about like consuming the right kind of information,
Right.
but it's also about nurturing those social connections and spending time with people who make us feel
Totally.
supported and understood.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that our well-being is not just like an individual pursuit.
Yeah.
It's something that we cultivate together
Mm-hmm.
through like shared experiences,
Yeah.
mutual support, and a sense of community.
It's like remembering that we're part of like a larger web of connection.
Exactly.
And that like our well-being is intertwined with the well-being of those around us.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that we're part of something larger than ourselves
Mhm.
and that well-being is interconnected.
Yeah.
And I think when we connect with others in these like meaningful ways, we tap into something really powerful that can't be replicated online,
Yeah, it's like remembering that we're human beings and not just digital avatars.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think this human connection is so essential for combating brain rot because it helps us to stay like grounded, engaged,
Yeah.
and connected to the real world.
Okay.
And speaking of engaging, another really important aspect, I think, is like the role of creativity.
Okay. Creativity. How does that fit into all of this?
So, when we're constantly just bombarded with information,
Right.
it's easy to fall into this kind of like passive mode of consumption.
Yeah.
We're just absorbing, processing, reacting.
Right.
But I think this passive mode can actually like stifle our own creativity.
Okay, so it's like our brains are on autopilot.
Yes.
Just scrolling and scrolling and not really engaging deeply with any of the content.
Right.
And that lack of engagement is like preventing us from kind of flexing those creative muscles.
Totally, yeah.
Okay.
And I think when we're not like actively creating, we're not exercising those mental muscles that allow us to think outside the box,
Right.
come up with new ideas and express ourselves in like really unique ways.
So you're saying that fighting brain rot is not just about like consuming the right kind of information,
Right.
but it's also about like making time for creative pursuits.
Yes.
Engaging our imaginations, whether that's like, writing, painting, playing music,
Totally.
coming up with a new recipe.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that like creativity isn't just a hobby
Right.
or a pastime. It's like an essential part of what makes us human,
Yeah.
It's how we make sense of the world,
Mm-hmm.
how we connect with others,
Yeah.
and how we leave our mark on the universe.
It's like the spark that like ignites our passions.
Exactly.
Fuels our innovations, drives our progress.
Yes. And when we neglect our creativity, we're not only doing ourselves a disservice,
Mm-hmm.
but also like the world around us.
Right. Okay. So how do we make sure that creativity doesn't get lost in the shuffle of our busy lives? Like, how do we carve out the time
Right.
for those creative pursuits that bring us joy and fulfillment?
I think it starts with just like recognizing the importance of creativity
Okay.
and making it a priority in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of like squeezing in a creative activity when we have a spare moment, we can like actually schedule dedicated time for it.
Oh, okay.
Just like we would for like a doctor's appointment or a work meeting.
Wow. So like
Like-
really making a conscious choice to like
Yes.
invest in our creativity, just
Yeah.
like we invest in like our education,
Totally.
like careers, our
Business.
relationship.
Exactly. And the rewards of this investment can be immense. You know,
Okay.
I think creativity not only brings us joy and fulfillment, but it also helps us to be more innovative, more resilient, and more adaptable in like a rapidly changing world.
Yeah, it's like giving our brains a workout,
Totally.
stretching those like creative muscles
Yeah,
and expanding our capacity for problem solving and critical thinking.
absolutely.
Wow. Okay. So we've talked about connecting with others, engaging our creativity. What other like tools can
Yeah.
we use to combat brain rot?
I think another really powerful tool is mindfulness.
Okay.
Think about it. One of the like hallmarks of brain rot is that feeling of being like mentally scattered, overwhelmed by information, and like just disconnected from the present moment.
Yeah, it's true. When you're like constantly scrolling, checking notifications,
Right.
juggling multiple tabs,
Totally.
you lose touch with what's happening like right here, right now.
Exactly. And I think that state of mental distraction can actually lead to stress, anxiety, even depression.
Right.
And mindfulness is all about like bringing our attention to the present moment without judgment. It's about noticing our thoughts, feelings, and sensations without getting like swept away by them.
So like hitting the pause button
Yes.
on that constant stream of information
Yeah.
and taking a moment to just be present.
Exactly. And this practice of like being present can have really profound effects on our mental well-being.
Okay.
It helps reduce stress, improve focus,
Okay.
and cultivate just a greater sense of calm and clarity.
So it sounds like mindfulness is like a key ingredient in the recipe for like a brain rot resistant life.
Absolutely. It's not just about consuming the right kind of information
Right.
or engaging in creative pursuits.
Yeah.
It's also about cultivating this like mindful approach to life
Okay.
that allows us to be more present, more grounded, and more resilient
Yeah.
in the face of like all these digital distractions.
Okay, so how do we like integrate mindfulness into our daily lives?
Well, there are a lot of different ways to practice mindfulness. Like meditation, yoga, or even just taking a few moments each day to like focus on our breath
Mm-hmm.
and just be fully present in our surroundings.
Okay.
Like even simple acts like mindful eating or walking can help to cultivate this like sense of presence.
So it's not about becoming like a meditation guru or anything like that.
Right.
It's about finding like small ways to like bring mindfulness into our everyday routines.
Exactly. And I think this practice of mindfulness can be incredibly beneficial in combating brain rot.
Okay.
Like when we're more present, we're less likely to like get sucked into that vortex of mindless scrolling and information overload.
Mm-hmm.
We're more likely to like make conscious choices about how we spend our time
Right.
and what we allow into our minds.
Right. It's like reclaiming our attention and directing it towards the things that truly matter.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
But in this like hyper-connected world, it can be hard to disconnect, right?
Yeah, that's true. Like, how do we create space for mindfulness when we're like constantly bombarded with notifications and demands on our time?
Yeah, good
I
question.
think that's where the importance of like setting boundaries comes in.
Okay.
You know, in a world where we're always connected,
Right.
it's essential to like establish clear boundaries between our online and offline lives.
So not becoming like digital hermits
Oh,
and
yeah.
abandoning technology altogether.
You're right. Not at all. It's about finding that healthy balance and making sure like technology serves our needs,
Okay.
not the other way around.
Right.
Cool.
So it's like setting rules for our relationship with technology,
Exactly.
just like we would in any other relationship.
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
It's about recognizing that we have the power to decide when and how we engage with technology.
Mm.
You know, we can choose to turn off notifications,
Right.
designate like tech-free zones in our homes, or even like schedule regular digital detoxes. It's about like creating space for those activities that like nourish our minds and bodies.
Exactly.
Like, you know, spending time in nature,
Yeah.
connecting with loved ones,
Totally.
pursuing those creative hobbies we were just talking about. I mean,
Absolutely.
it's like giving ourselves permission to unplug, disconnect, and just be present in the moment.
Exactly. And this practice of like setting boundaries can be incredibly liberating.
Right.
You know,
Okay.
it allows us to like reclaim our time,
Yeah.
our energy, our attention,
Right.
and direct it towards things that bring us like joy, fulfillment, and a sense of purpose.
It's about taking back control of our lives and making sure that technology serves our needs, not the other way around.
Totally. But sometimes it feels like technology like has a mind of its own, you know?
Yeah, that's true.
It can be so hard to resist. Like the pull of those notifications and the allure of that endless stream of content.
That's so true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, the digital world is designed to capture our attention
Mm-hmm.
and keep us engaged. But we can train ourselves to be more mindful of these distractions
Yeah, okay.
and to like resist the urge to give in to them.
Mm.
And I think one helpful strategy is just to become like really aware of how technology is impacting us.
Okay.
Like notice how you feel after spending time on social media or browsing the internet.
Right.
Do you feel energized or drained,
Right.
inspired or depleted?
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Just paying attention to how technology makes us feel
Yeah.
and recognizing when it's starting to like have a negative impact on our well-being.
Exactly. And if you notice that you're feeling drained or overwhelmed,
Right.
it might be time to like take a break,
Mm-hmm.
set some boundaries, and just reevaluate your relationship with technology.
Okay, so it's about remembering that we have the power to choose how we interact with technology
Exactly.
and to make sure that it's serving us and not controlling us.
Absolutely. And this awareness is like the first step in breaking free from that like brain rot cycle and creating a digital life that like supports our well-being, our growth, and our aspirations.
So it's not about rejecting technology or like retreating from the digital world,
Right.
but it's about like engaging with it mindfully, intentionally, and with a clear sense of our own like values and goals.
Exactly. It's about harnessing the power of technology to enhance our lives, expand our horizons, and connect with others in meaningful ways.
Okay.
You know, it's about recognizing that technology is a tool.
Mm-hmm.
And like any tool, it can be used for good or for ill.
Right.
The key is to use it wisely
Mm-hmm.
and make sure it serves our needs, not the other way around.
It sounds like combating brain rot is like a journey,
It is.
not a destination. Like
Right.
it's this constant process of evaluating our relationship with technology, making adjustments, and finding that balance that works for us.
Absolutely. It's an ongoing process of self-discovery and adaptation.
Right.
And I think the more we practice mindfulness,
Yeah.
set boundaries,
Right.
cultivate healthy habits,
Right.
the more empowered we become to like navigate this digital world
Mm-hmm.
with intention and grace.
Yeah, it's about remembering that we have the power to like shape our digital experiences
Totally.
and create a future where technology supports like our growth, our connection,
Yes.
and our well-being.
Exactly. And speaking of growth, let's talk about another really crucial aspect of like combating brain rot,
Okay.
the importance of personal growth.
Okay, personal growth. How does that fit into all of this?
So think about it. One of the hallmarks of brain rot is that feeling of stagnation,
Okay.
of being like stuck in a rut,
Right.
not moving forward in our lives,
Right.
when we're constantly consuming like the same kind of information,
Right.
engaging in the same routines, and not challenging ourselves mentally. It's
Yeah.
easy to feel like we're not growing or evolving.
Right. When we're not learning and growing, it's easy to just like get stuck in our ways
Yeah,
and miss out on the opportunities that life has to offer.
absolutely. And this lack of growth can actually lead to like, feelings of boredom,
Right.
apathy, even despair.
Wow.
And that's why I think personal growth is such a powerful antidote to brain rot.
Okay.
Because when we're actively engaged in like personal growth, we're constantly learning, expanding our horizons,
Right.
and challenging ourselves to like become better versions of ourselves.
So it's not just about consuming the right kind of information or setting boundaries with technology,
Right.
but it's like actively seeking out opportunities for growth,
Exactly.
pushing ourselves beyond our comfort zones.
Totally. It's about recognizing that personal growth is like a lifelong journey, not a destination. It's about embracing the process of learning, evolving, and becoming more of who we're meant to be.
Okay, and this journey of like personal growth can take many forms,
Yeah.
right? It might involve like, taking on new challenges, learning new skills,
Totally.
traveling to new places, connecting with new people,
That's
or just
step
like exploring new ideas.
Exactly. It's about finding what like lights us up and pursuing it with passion and curiosity.
Right. And the benefits of
Yeah.
personal growth can be profound.
They can.
Right.
It helps us like build confidence,
Okay.
develop resilience,
Mm-hmm.
and cultivate like a greater sense of purpose and meaning in our lives.
It's like giving ourselves the gift of continuous evolution, always, like
Yeah.
striving to become better versions of ourselves.
I love that. Yeah.
Okay, so how do we know what areas of our lives need this personal growth boost?
I think that's where self-reflection comes in.
Okay.
Because another like symptom of brain rot is that lack of self-awareness,
Oh,
like being swept along by the currents of information and like external stimuli
yeah.
without really stopping to like examine our own thoughts, feelings, and motivations.
It's true. When we're not taking the time to reflect,
Right.
we're more likely to like make choices that are not aligned with our values
Exactly.
or our goals. And we end up living on autopilot instead of consciously creating the life we want.
Yes, exactly. And this lack of self-awareness can lead to feelings of like dissonance, confusion, even regret.
Right.
And that's why I think self-reflection is such a vital tool
Okay.
for combating brain rot. It's the process of like turning our attention inward and examining our thoughts, feelings, beliefs, and motivations.
Okay, so like taking a mental inventory, assessing our strengths and weaknesses,
I do.
identifying those areas where we want to grow and evolve.
Totally. And this practice of self-reflection can be incredibly empowering because it helps us like identify patterns that are no longer serving us,
Right.
to set boundaries that protect our well-being, and to make decisions that are actually in alignment with our values and aspirations.
It's like giving ourselves the gift of self-awareness, allowing us to see ourselves more clearly.
Yeah.
And to like it seems like combating brain rot isn't just about avoiding certain types of content or anything like that. It's really about like cultivating a lifestyle that supports our overall well-being.
Totally. And I think you've hit the nail on the head. Like, it's about recognizing that our mental and emotional health are so intertwined with like, our physical health,
Right.
our relationships, our sense of purpose, and even like our connection to something larger than ourselves,
Right.
It's a very holistic approach
Yeah.
to like thriving in a world that's constantly like vying for our attention.
Yeah. It's a lot to consider. But
Yeah.
this conversation, I think, has been like incredibly eye-opening.
I agree.
We've explored so many different like facets of brain rot,
Exactly.
like from the science behind multitasking to like the importance of mindfulness, creativity, human connection. And like, it's clear that there's no like one size fits all solution,
Right.
but rather like a very multifaceted approach to like cultivating resilience and a healthy relationship with like information and technology.
Exactly. And I think the beauty of this approach is that it like really empowers us to take control of our own well-being.
Right.
Like we can choose to be more mindful of our content consumption,
Right.
set boundaries with technology, cultivate like gratitude and resilience,
Yeah.
and engage in those activities that like really nourish our minds and bodies.
Right. It's about recognizing that we have agency and like shaping our digital experiences
For
and
sure.
like creating a future where technology supports our growth, our
Yeah,
connection, and our well-being rather than, detracting from it.
absolutely. And this kind of brings us back to that like really fascinating connection we made earlier
Right.
between the like figurative brain rot
Hmm.
of like too much online content
Yeah.
and the literal preservation of brains
Hmm.
through like protein changes.
Right.
It makes you wonder if there's like a deeper relationship between how we engage with information during our lives and like the long-term health of our physical brains.
It's a really, like, thought-provoking concept. It suggests that our choices today, not just, like, what we consume, but,
Yeah,
like, how we engage with information, could have implications for, like, our cognitive health in the years to come.
totally. Yeah.
Wow.
I think it's a reminder that our minds are like, precious and powerful instruments
Right.
that deserve to be like nurtured and protected.
Right.
And that the choices we make today can have like a ripple effect, influencing not only our own well-being, but
Yeah.
also like the well-being of future generations.
So as we kind of navigate this increasingly complex, like, digital world,
Right.
it's essential to remember that we have the power to, like, shape our own experiences,
Yeah.
cultivate healthy habits, and, like, create a future where technology enhances our lives rather than diminishes them.
Absolutely. And I think it's about recognizing that the digital world isn't like a separate realm from our like physical world.
Right.
It's an extension of ourselves, a reflection of our values, and like a canvas upon which we can paint a like more enlightened and fulfilling future.
That's a really great way to put it.
Thank you.
And I think that's like a perfect note to end on.
Yeah.
So thanks for joining us on this deep dive into brain rot.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
It's been a pleasure exploring this topic with you.
Likewise.
We hope you found this insightful and inspiring.
Yes. And remember, dear listeners, like the journey of combating brain rot is like an ongoing one.
Yeah.
It's about making those like conscious choices each and every day to nourish our minds, cultivate our well-being, and embrace the power of technology to like enhance our lives.
Absolutely. Until next time, stay curious, stay engaged, and keep those brains sharp.